You know that moment when you trip slightly on the sidewalk and immediately feel like everyone within a 3-block radius witnessed your graceful stumble? Or when you wear a new outfit and become convinced that every person you pass is silently judging your fashion choices? Your heart races, your palms sweat, and you replay the moment over and over in your mind. Here's the uncomfortable truth: almost nobody noticed, and even fewer people actually care. This phenomenon has a name in psychology. It's called the spotlight effect, and it's one of the most pervasive cognitive biases that shapes how we navigate social situations every single day. The spotlight effect is our tendency to dramatically overestimate how much attention other people are paying to our appearance, our behavior, and our mistakes. We walk through life convinced that there's an invisible spotlight following us around, illuminating every awkward moment, every imperfection, every misstep for the entire world to see and judge. The reality is that no such spotlight exists. Most people are far too busy worrying about their own invisible spotlights to notice yours. The term was coined by psychologists Thomas Gilovich and Kenneth Savitsky in the late 1990s, but they weren't just making casual observations about human behavior. They designed a series of clever experiments to demonstrate just how powerful this bias actually is. In one of their most famous studies, they asked participants to wear embarrassing t-shirts. Not just any embarrassing t-shirts, but ones featuring the face of Barry Manilow, a singer who the researchers believed would be considered uncool by college students at the time. The participants wearing these shirts were asked to enter a room where other students were filling out questionnaires. Afterwards, both the t-shirt wearers and the observers were asked to estimate how many people in the room had noticed the shirt. The results were striking. The people wearing the Barry Manilow shirts estimated that about half of the people in the room had noticed what they were wearing. In reality, only about 23% of observers could actually recall seeing the shirt. The t-shirt wearers believed they were twice as noticeable as they actually were. This wasn't just about Barry Manilow. This was about a fundamental misunderstanding of how human attention actually works. But why does our brain do this to us? Why are we hardwired to believe we're constantly under scrutiny when we're really not? The answer lies in the way our brains process information and our evolutionary history. From a neurological standpoint, you are the center of your own universe. Every experience you have is filtered through your own consciousness. You're the protagonist of your own story, and you have access to all your internal monologues, anxieties, and self-criticisms. When you spill coffee on your shirt, you don't just notice the stain. You feel the warmth of the liquid, you smell the coffee, you experience the embarrassment, you remember similar past mistakes, and you imagine future social consequences. You have complete access to this rich, multi-sensory, emotionally charged experience. So naturally, your brain assumes that others must be having a similarly detailed awareness of what just happened to you. But here's what you're missing. Other people don't have access to any of that internal experience. They only see a brief external event, and they're processing it through the filter of their own concerns, thoughts, and preoccupations. They're not thinking about your coffee stain. They're thinking about their upcoming meeting, or what they're having for lunch, or their own insecurities about something completely unrelated to you. This egocentric bias is actually a feature of human cognition, not a bug. Our brains evolved to prioritize our own survival and social standing within our small tribal groups. In ancient human societies, being ostracized from the group could literally mean death. So our ancestors, who were more sensitive to social evaluation, who paid close attention to how they were perceived by others, had better survival odds. They could adjust their behavior to maintain their position in the social hierarchy. The problem is that our modern brains are still running on this ancient software, even though the social environment has changed dramatically. We no longer live in small tribes where everyone actually does know everyone else's business. We live in massive societies where most of the people we encounter daily are strangers who will never think about us again. But our brains haven't gotten the memo. The spotlight effect doesn't just make us feel unnecessarily self-conscious. It has real consequences for how we live our lives. It prevents us from taking social risks, from expressing ourselves authentically, from trying new things that might make us look foolish. It keeps us playing small because we're terrified of judgment that mostly exists only in our own minds. Think about how many times you've avoided speaking up in a meeting because you were worried your idea might sound stupid. How many times you've stayed quiet in a social gathering because you didn't want to say the wrong thing. How many creative projects you've never started because you were worried about what people would think if you failed. The spotlight effect is often the invisible force behind these decisions. Research has shown that the spotlight effect is particularly powerful when it comes to our perceived failures and embarrassments, but it also applies to our positive attributes. Gilovich and Savitsky found that people also overestimate how much others notice their good qualities, their successes, and their moments of triumph. So we're not just paranoid about our mistakes. We're generally miscalibrated about how much attention we're receiving across the board. There's another related phenomenon called the illusion of transparency, which is closely connected to the spotlight effect. This is our tendency to overestimate how well our internal states are visible to others. When you're nervous during a presentation, you're convinced that everyone can see your hands shaking and hear the tremor in your voice. When you're lying, you're sure that everyone can tell. When you're feeling insecure, you believe it's written all over your face. Studies on the illusion of transparency show that our internal experiences feel so vivid and overwhelming to us that we can't imagine they're not equally obvious to everyone else. But they're not. People are remarkably bad at reading others' internal states, even when they're trying. Your anxiety feels deafening to you, but to others, you probably seem fine. Understanding the spotlight effect can be genuinely liberating. When you realize that most people are not paying nearly as much attention to you as you think they are, it frees you up to take more risks, to be more authentic, to worry less about small social mistakes. It's not that people don't notice you at all. It's that they notice you far less than you imagine, and they care even less than that. One of the most powerful ways to counteract the spotlight effect is to actively practice perspective taking. When you're worried about how you came across in a social situation, try to honestly recall how much attention you paid to other people's minor mistakes or awkward moments. Chances are, you barely noticed them, and if you did notice, you probably forgot about them within minutes. This is exactly how other people are processing your mistakes too. Another helpful strategy is to remind yourself that most people are the protagonists of their own stories, not supporting characters in yours. That person who might have seen you trip on the sidewalk, they've already moved on to thinking about their own problems. They're not at home replaying your stumble in their mind. They're worrying about their own stumbles, their own insecurities, their own invisible spotlights. The spotlight effect also explains why we tend to remember our own embarrassing moments with crystal clarity while struggling to recall the embarrassing moments of others. You probably have a mental highlight reel of your most cringeworthy moments that plays unbidden in your mind at 3 a.m. But can you recall with the same clarity the embarrassing moments of your friends, your colleagues, your acquaintances? Probably not, because you weren't paying that much attention in the first place. This asymmetry in memory is another clue that the spotlight effect is distorting your perception. If you can't remember other people's minor social mistakes, why would they remember yours? Some researchers have found that the spotlight effect may be even stronger in adolescence and young adulthood, which makes sense given that these are periods of intense social comparison and identity formation. Teenagers often feel like they're constantly being watched and evaluated, which can lead to significant social anxiety. But the spotlight effect doesn't disappear with age. Adults experience it too, just perhaps with slightly less intensity. There's also evidence that the spotlight effect may vary across cultures. In more individualistic societies, where standing out and being unique is valued, people may be more sensitive to being noticed. In more collectivist cultures, where fitting in with the group is prioritized, the fear of standing out inappropriately might manifest differently, but the underlying mechanism is similar. Social media has added a new dimension to the spotlight effect. In some ways, social media creates an actual spotlight. People are literally watching and evaluating your curated posts, your photos, your updates. But even here, Research suggests we overestimate how much attention our posts receive. We think everyone is scrutinizing our vacation photos or our witty status updates, when in reality, most people are scrolling past quickly, far more focused on crafting their own posts. The irony of social media is that it can intensify the spotlight effect while also providing evidence against it. You might obsess over getting the perfect photo or crafting the perfect caption, convinced that everyone will judge you harshly if you get it wrong. But then you'll scroll through your own feed and realize how little attention you're actually paying to other people's posts. You're not analyzing their lives in the detail you imagine they're analyzing yours. Breaking free from the spotlight effect doesn't mean becoming completely indifferent to social norms or how you present yourself to the world. Social awareness and appropriate self-monitoring are important skills. The goal is to right-size your estimate of how much you're being observed and evaluated. You want to find a middle ground between being completely oblivious to social cues and being paralyzed by the imaginary judgments of others. One practical way to recalibrate your sense of how much you're being noticed is to actually test your assumptions. The next time you're convinced everyone noticed your mistake, try asking a trusted friend if they saw what happened. More often than not, they'll have no idea what you're talking about. These reality checks can slowly rewire your intuitions about how much attention you're actually receiving. It's worth noting that some amount of self-consciousness serves an important function. It helps us maintain social relationships, adhere to norms, and present ourselves in ways that facilitate cooperation with others. The problem isn't self-awareness itself. The problem is the dramatic overestimation of how much we're being scrutinized, which leads to anxiety and self-limitation that serves no useful purpose. The spotlight effect reveals something profound about human psychology. We are simultaneously self-centered and socially anxious. We can't help but view the world from our own perspective, which leads us to assume we're more central to other people's awareness than we actually are. We're all walking around convinced we're being watched, when really we're all too busy watching ourselves. The next time you feel that familiar wave of embarrassment or self-consciousness, remember that the spotlight you feel shining on you exists primarily in your own mind. Other people are not your audience. They're dealing with their own spotlights, their own anxieties, their own internal experiences that feel just as overwhelming to them as yours do to you. You're all in this together, each convinced you're uniquely visible, each mostly invisible to everyone else. This realization isn't depressing. It's actually one of the most freeing insights psychology has to offer. It means you have permission to take more risks, to care less about minor mistakes, to be more authentically yourself. Because the harsh judgment you fear is mostly just noise in your own head, not an actual reflection of what others are thinking. The spotlight has been in your control all along. You just didn't realize you could turn it off.